Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. There's no surefire way to accomplish anything in life, but with each conversation, we aim to delve into diverse topics and present fresh perspectives to empower you, our fellow colleague, on your journey to success. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by an accomplished HR visionary whose journey has taken him from a small Indian town to the vibrant landscapes of Germany. Over the course of more than a decade, he has amassed a wealth of experience traversing diverse countries, regions, and cultures, giving him the opportunity to observe and understand how individuals from varied backgrounds respond to one another. His fascination with the concept of psychological safety has evolved significantly, beginning with his thesis at the United Nations and culminating in his current role of championing this vital concept within a fully remote organization. So when you're ready, grab your favorite tea or coffee, if you prefer, and join me in welcoming today's guest, the HR lead at Beam and G, Joseph.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
I always like to start these off the same way because I think talent acquisition is such a broad topic in such, but I always like to understand more about yourself. So what got you into talent acquisition in the first place, and why do you do what you do?
Mhm. I think it was because of my dad.
Hmm.
He has his own NGO, and I've seen his leadership, and I often seen him uh, taking care of his employees, right? And there's so much emphasis on how he wants the employees to feel comfortable, trust, and all that thing comes in. And as a little boy growing in that organization, it was always fascinating. What made it so important that he wants to make the employees feel comfortable, give them that space, and all that stuff. So it just ticked me a lot, and I wanted to learn through it and see what's the theory behind all this practical thing.
Yeah.
So that's when I started studying and getting it more information about talent acquisition in general HR, and slowly that's when it moved over to talent acquisition. And I think one big reason was the United Nations. I was so into um, their recruitment process, and I was just like, how can they just do this? What just made them to trust me so much when I haven't seen any of those guys? Such a big organization, the biggest international organization. They haven't seen me, just virtual interview, but they trusted me. And that was like, why? That the question. And that's how I started getting more and more into talent acquisition. Yeah.
Nice. The reason I say that as well is I love hearing the stories from different backgrounds around this because you ask external recruiters why they get into it. Most people would just say they fell into it. But when you talk to internals like yourself, there's always kind of like this more intentional thing, and this is really interesting to kind of see. So you're started from a very young age with obviously looking up to your father and his NGO. And does it still run today, the NGO, or has it kind of
Yes,
closed down?
yes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Do you
They're
still
down by
support
30
from the
years now.
outside?
Yes, we do. We do.
Good.
But I think my dad is running it more than 30 years now. It's like 32 now. So, yes.
Wow, that's very, very impressive. Well, look, obviously the topic for today is around psychological safety. I know it's an aspect of yours, as I mentioned in the introduction, that started kind of in your thesis, unintentionally, I guess, now has kind of traversed all the way through your career and to this conversation right now. So we discussed before that you feel there's a big difference, I guess, between psychological safety when you're in office, so in person, versus when you're remote. And obviously you've done both as far as I'm aware, right?
Yes.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about what you feel are kind of like the stark differences between them.
I mean, both in person and in remote environment, psychological safety is more about how you um, give the employees the space to feel safe.
Hmm.
They shouldn't be projecting or be afraid to share their um, interest or share their voices. And that's most important, irrespective of whether it's office or in remote environment. But what I see within an office environment is um, if I feel bad, I can just scroll down my chair and then just look at my colleague and say, hey, it's just such a gloomy day. I feel like I wanted to just go back home. But you can't do that in a remote environment. There could be chances, but the connection, the uh, it's more easy to connect with your colleagues
Mm.
um, who are just sitting next to you, um, and that is possible. But at the same time, in a remote environment, um, you can't simply say that you make your employees comfortable, right? Because they want their work-life balance. Some could be having kids at their home. Some could be taking their family. Some could also take care of their um, uh, like cousins or family members, anybody. They're all part of it, right? And just by saying, oh, we give you the space to be comfortable, doesn't mean that they're comfortable. So there's a lot more emphasis in how we can make them comfortable. That is there when people work in a remote environment. So that I see like could be the biggest difference in it. And also when it especially comes to feedback or when it comes to performance evaluations or when it comes to one-on-one meetings,
Mm.
you can easily um, find out the nuances in terms of nonverbal communication when you're in person, right? But when you have a person across the country and someone who don't want to turn on their camera, right? You can't even see them. You only hear their voice. Sometimes people choose writing text meetings. In that cases, how it is very hard to find out the nonverbal cues, or very hard to find out whether the person is stressed or not stressed. You need to take more trainings, or you need to understand. You need to better able to understand the person sitting next to your monitor.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things are very hard. And I think with in-person office, it's a bit easy, but I wouldn't say they're both the same. But it's a bit easy to find out these things.
Yeah, I get your concept. It's not easy for sure, but it's
Mhm.
easier in person because you can see if someone, as you say, is having a bit of a down day, and you
Mhm.
can see directly their verbal and non-verbal cues.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll dive into throughout this, I guess, a little kind of more into the methods that you've adopted, I guess, throughout your career and what you and the team are doing at BeamNG to kind of
Mhm.
create this psychological safe environment. But definitely, I agree. There's some stark differences, as you've mentioned. But the bigger question, I think, really that maybe I've missed this, so I apologize. What
Mhm.
do we actually mean by psychological safety? Because I think it seems to be a phrase that gets passed around. I think most people have an idea,
Mhm.
but from your perspective, what do we truly mean by it?
Psychological safety is something. It's not a new term that recently was coined. It's been there within the HR cycle for many years, but it just shifted a little high due to the recent influence on hybrid and remote working environments. Right. I really like the book of Fearless Organization
Mhm.
from a Harvard professor. She coins it very nice. It's like really interesting to see how she puts it together. Right. It's like employees need to feel okay to take risk, who can share their voices, who can make errors without being afraid, and who can also share their mistakes or errors with the whole team without being judged, right? Who can also feel that their other team members will not judge them in any way. So it's about creating a safe working space for their own people. It's not about the output, it's about the outcome. Um, so when people come and say that um, they made a terrible mistake or they did something tremendously a big flaw in their
Mm.
project, um, often we ask people, what did you do? Or how did you make that mistake? How can we recover the production or whatever it is? But what we should ask is, what did you learn?
Yeah.
Yeah, the learning is the most important thing. And that is where we create the psychological safety. That is the initial step of creating the whole process of psychological safety. And if we don't focus on learning, then it's just about the output, right? If we make profits, then it's all over. But what did we learn by
Mm.
doing that?
Is it still
That's
important
that's what.
to ask the other side though? Is it still important to say, look, what did you learn? What did you do? So we can uncover.
Yes, it shows that you're also concerned, right? It's like it shows that you're not only focused on the output of the project. If you achieve the target, is it enough? But what did you learn during the time?
Mm.
The learning is not just only for the organization, right?
Yeah.
When at Beam we always do, it's like it's not just the company that wants to grow, it's also the people that has to grow. That's where the real success is.
So
So
it's
it's together we achieve success.
so it's about kind of, as you said, I know it's going to sound silly now. It's about creating a safe environment, obviously, but you know what I mean. But it's
Yeah.
giving the person the opportunity to voice, no matter if it was good or bad, but giving an opportunity to say, look, something has either gone. I guess it doesn't have to just be wrong though. It could also be something that's gone well, and then we can still also find the learns. But being comfortable enough as an employee based around the environment your employer has created for you to at least speak regardless of if it's good or bad. Okay.
Yeah.
Who's the driver of this?
I mean, it should actually come from every single one, if you ask me. This is like some of the basic management principles in something that we have to
Mm,
do. But it also has to be initiated from the leadership.
yeah.
The leadership needs to take that first push to say that let's do this. If the leaders don't follow, then the people that are behind them will not take it up. So, in my opinion, everyone should do it, but in a company scenario, that the leaders should push it forward so it's more effective. So,
Say someone is in a non-leadership position today.
mm-hmm,
Their talent
mm-hmm,
acquisition, IC role,
mm-hmm,
the scope of the leadership that they have is obviously going to be limited. How can they speak to their manager or speak to their leaders of the organization around this topic if they don't feel that it's something that's being addressed at the moment?
mm-hmm. It's not easy to tell your boss that you're making mistakes, or it's not easy to tell your boss that something is going wrong with the project.
Yeah,
It's not an easy task. But when you look at it deeply, um, it's about how you expresses it, right? So one thing that we have to do within the company is, from both the sides, from the employer and from the employee, is creating expectations. And expectations is something that is, I see it's very important. So if the manager is not able to get what he or she, whatever they want from the employee, they should be able to say what they expected,
sure.
and vice versa. The employee should also do it. And if they do that, then the other person will be able to understand. I don't know if they would change it, but they can understand that, oh, my team member expected something else.
Mhm.
Is everything going okay? Should we have another call to check what it is? And how can we change the whole thing? And within BeamNG, one thing that we do is we have mediators and facilitators.
Okay.
Um, those people, they help mediate the thoughts or feedback from an employee to a team lead or to the lead, and vice versa.
Okay, so they're not leading that individual. They're not directly
Mm-hmm.
responsible for that person's work.
Mm-hmm.
They're just there as I guess, as a voice for them if they don't
Yes.
feel comfortable
Mm-hmm.
doing it themselves. Is
Mm-hmm.
that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct.
So how does it
Yes.
look in practice? So say you was my mediator. I'm not comfortable in this position
Mm-hmm.
voicing that I think something could
Mm-hmm.
be done better. How would a mediator go out and do this?
Mm-hmm. Um, they're trained specialists in communications, right? They're internal communication specialists. They sit at meetings and they listen. Listening is the first step, right? And they listen to both the parties, and then they transcribe or translate what the person said to the other person. It could be at different words. It could be maybe adding two, three lines in it, or just making it more empathetic. Um, and that is translated to the other person. And then they ask, how do you receive it? And then they do the same again. And then if both the parties understand what they actually mean in with more humility and more empathy, and that helps them to calm down.
Yeah.
And then the real conversation starts.
So
And then we talk about how we're going to do it. Yeah.
sorry to interject. Does this happen
Hmm.
together? So say it's you and I,
Yes.
we're in the same room or
Um,
hypothetical room because we're remote.
yes. There's a process, right?
Okay.
They do individual calls
Hmm.
to first understand each person's interest
Hmm.
and why they want to do that, and then um, they bring both of them together. But it's with consent, right? They would ask, "I'm going to have a call together with all three of us. Are you interested? Would you be comfortable in doing it?" Only if they say yes, then they will bring them all together,
Mm.
and then they will have a chat. And then we do follow-ups. So it's not like we have the meeting together and then everything is
Rosie.
set. We do regular follow-ups. We do again and again, so monthly once, and then we slowly move the monthly meeting to 2 months once, and then we stop it. So it goes on regular follow-ups to see if they are able to do that, and that helps.
Sounds very similar to a company that I work with in Germany. They call it a
Hmm.
chapter lead. So the person is
Hmm.
responsible for people inside a different team. So they would work in their
Hmm.
own project. They lead from a technical perspective inside that project, but they have people that report to them in a different project. And the reason for that is that then there's no crossover on their work. So their reportees can say, hey, we're unhappy with this part of the project, comfortably speak to their chapter lead because the chapter lead isn't involved in that project. So they're less emotionally attached to what they're working on, so they have a bit more of a level head about how to approach it.
Hmm.
Um, and that's worked really well. I know chapter leads is quite a common thing in smaller teams, but this company is like 200 plus, and it works really, really
Yeah.
well. But
Hmm.
it's a very different mindset to lead in, and the
Hmm.
mediators. It sounds very similar to that. Maybe you're not leading the technical side, but it sounds very similar from the people perspective.
Yeah.
You mentioned these people obviously trained on this. So is it training that you
Hmm.
do in-house to upskill these individuals, or do you have a kind of a system in place
So
externally?
yeah, they do a lot of trainings externally too, um, and they are also nonviolent communication trainers. So they follow nonviolent communication, and that's really interesting. I mean, I also did training back when I was in the university in Germany, and then with my previous employer, they also had this for everyone within the company. So it's been in practice within certain companies
Mm,
that they follow these things, and that helps a lot. But they do have to do a lot of external
mm.
trainings because this is like a specific group of people that are connected. and they had to learn more in equipping themselves with that. Yeah.
Do you ever get any kind of a situation where, I guess, once you've had this conversation maybe once or twice, you
Mhm.
recognize who the mediators are, and when you get an invite from that person, you know, I guess you probably can tell where I'm leading with this. You look at it and think, okay, here we go. Like, again, I know that's not the environment that you want to create, but there's going to be people along the journey that I'm sure probably don't gel as well with this style.
Mhm.
So, what
Mhm.
happens in those situations?
Yes. It's an individual preference, right? So if it's also about giving that level of comfortness. If there are not someone who's comfortable with another mediator or a
Mm,
facilitator, then it's not the right choice to put them again together with them. So we had to choose another approach in how we're going to do that. So in those kinds of meetings, it's all about um, listening to them. They might have a valid reason why they don't want to do that, and sometimes we often, even in my previous employment, we often hear people say that I'm not ready, right? They say that I know that you're doing the right thing. Yes, that meeting is important, but I'm not ready.
voice
And
their
that means they need
opinion?
more time.
Is that what you mean? Okay.
Yes, yes. It's the employee's opinion that they're not ready to do that meeting. So in that scenario, you can't force them.
Yeah.
It's more about, okay, how can we help you?
Mm.
What is there to support you? Do you need anything from our side? And we need to understand the situation better. But if we force it, it's not going to go anywhere.
So it's just reinforcing the aspect of
Mhm.
safety until that individual is
Mhm.
ready to come out and say, this is the problem.
Exactly.
This is, and
Exactly.
okay.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they're not able to come out and say openly about that because they don't feel safe,
Mm.
right? So without that safe environment, they cannot openly say that this is what went through me and I want to share it with you.
Yeah.
So until we create that space, until they feel safe, um, we need to see how we can reinforce the whole thing. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think a lot of companies believe they have a psychologically safe environment, but in reality, I would imagine the vast majority don't. In honesty, I think from what I was
Mhm.
seeing, I guess I can draw that experience back to, as an external recruiter, the amount of times I
Mhm.
hear, especially in the first 6 months, obviously for Germany, it's a 6 month probational period. I've been let go,
Yeah.
but I don't know why. Maybe the applicant or the job seeker at the time, is trying to be,
Mhm.
well, just trying to tell me
Mhm.
something. I don't know, but you hear it and you're thinking, you should know. You should never get let go unless, unfortunately, obviously layoffs. Sometimes we don't know. But in the 6 month, if it's a
Mhm.
performance issue, you should never be let go without being aware that you're going to be let go if it's performance related. It shouldn't just be all of a sudden. And that's because I guess there isn't a psychologically safe place inside that company. Even the managers clearly aren't that safe there. Um,
Mhm.
I know obviously with yourselves at BeamNG, you have lots of different remote employees, right? Time zones are all over the place, right? So I know
Mhm.
obviously creating this space is difficult when we're remote. How more difficult is it when it's, 10 hours different time zone and we're talking about cultures and things like that because,
Yeah.
you're working with
Yeah.
so many different backgrounds and time zones. How does it kind of play into creating this environment then?
Mhm. It's yeah, it's tough. You have people from the two sides of the time zone and are working completely the opposite times. It's hard, um, but um, we do a lot of things, right? So um, how do I put it? So we have regular
Hmm.
stand-ups um, where we don't want the people to come in and say out loud. We want them to write down.
Okay.
Right. So that means people that start 5 hours later can still read what the other team member has shared it.
So almost like
And
sorry, so like a suggestion box element,
yeah,
or do you write it down and then someone puts it up on a screen? How does that work?
it's like we put them all in a project management tool that covers
Okay.
everything together. So it's a huge document, and then people keep recording what they wanted to say.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and even with the cross team meetings and stuff, we try to record the meetings and save it up so people get the chance to see what it is going on, because some people might not be. And especially when we have people from different time zones, we have two meetings instead of one. So if they have a team meeting, they would have one for the earlier time zone, one for the later time zone, both open for everyone. We don't restrict and say you should not join or you should join. It's open, uh, and by that, people get to meet their team members irrespective of the time zones. Um, so that also kind of helps. So we do measures like this to make as much as we can to connect the team members.
How does that
Yeah.
impact, I guess, productivity? If you've got like two meetings, is it per day, per week? How does
No, it's 2 weeks
Okay,
once.
so kind of a sprint
Yeah.
cycle.
So it's not like, yeah.
Okay,
Yes, it's not like
yeah, I was going to
weekly.
say if it
Yeah.
was daily, that would be crazy. Productivity would be
Yes.
challenging, especially on the leaders. So you
Yes.
try to include
Hmm.
as many people in, to obviously those meetings, give them
Hmm.
the opportunity to see each other,
Yeah.
to meet each other. What else do you do to
Hmm.
kind of create this environment? Um, I guess specifically with your company at the moment.
Um, we always want our people to feel safe is one thing, but also um, feel included in
Hmm.
everything. They don't have to fear about speaking anything. They don't have to um, talk about other teams or something. So we have a very open communication system. Yeah. Anybody can share what they want, and that is being respected. So there is respect, and there is openness, and there is fairness and transparency. And these kinds of things help us to uh, make our people uh, share what they want and also feel safe. So anybody just writes to the chat, and then people starts talking about it, and they share what they
Hmm.
want, and it's being respected. So that is something that we want to create within Beam.
Does it
Yeah.
also work with feedback, for example, on an individual basis? So obviously, I
Hmm.
know we're talking about mediators, but say you and I both feel comfortable, is it
Hmm.
allowed for me to just call you up and give you the feedback? A radical candor, I guess, the element that we're looking at there, is that something that you try to
Hmm.
encourage, or do you kind of suggest that it's done in a more formal matter, like a formal meeting, opposed to just a off the cuff?
Hmm. I mean, they do the regular feedback sessions. So each team has their own ways of doing it, but they don't feel or they don't feel like they had to stop somewhere. If they do feel, they reach out to me or to the communication specialist, and we try to coordinate with them and see how we can help them. Right. So that's how we try to do it. So most of the times it's fine, but when they do need something, um, they're not stopped. Uh, they're open and free to share what they want.
I'm getting the sense as you're talking, Joseph, that this is
Hmm.
it's a long-term commitment, definitely, to a
Hmm.
business and to
Hmm.
you're not going to see
Hmm.
immediate results potentially. You're going to hire potentially
Yeah.
some people that just do not gel with this style. I mean,
Hmm.
again, we're coming back to a lot of people are going to use psychological safety as a branding tool
Yeah.
almost. We are that environment, but if you really want to create
Yeah.
this environment, it needs to be something that's a consistent kind of at the forefront of
Yes.
your mind. How has it
Yes.
changed since you've been there? 2 years, I think you've been with the team, right?
Yes, 2 years it's been. I mean, the culture of the company is not something that I changed, right? It's something that was in it. It's something that BMG is holding on to it and is very proud of it. So I didn't change any big of a culture. What I added is the processes,
Mm.
right? In how we do this thing. So I was the first HR in a long time. So creating these processes, transformation of the whole HR thing is what I did and helped it. So I maybe just, how do I say,
Yeah.
reframed and refurbished things and transformed it
So the
into a new
culture
thing. That's
was
it.
already
Yeah.
there. You've just kind of given it
Mhm,
a little bit more
mhm,
structure, I guess, and created, say,
mhm.
the process to allow. I guess it also gives you the chance to determine where things are going wrong, so you can evaluate and
Yep.
adjust and
Mhm.
pivot. And I guess this also comes back to the
Yep.
point of it's an ongoing thing, right? Even if you've got the processes in place, it's about
Mhm.
refreshing
Yep.
yourself and working out from there. Um, we touched briefly upon culture, right? And people come from different backgrounds and people having different cultures in general. How does
Mhm.
that play into how people and this whole process of psychological safety kind of is impacted? Because some people are very direct, some people are a little bit more evasive. How does that kind of come play into this impact?
Yeah. Let's take me as an example. So, when I started my career back in India, um, we always have this idea of you have to do whatever that's been given to you. Any project, any tasks that come to you, you take it.
Okay.
You don't say that you don't know how to do it, or you you get that because it might impact your contract, or it might feel like you will be fired if you say no to
Mm,
something, or you might get in bad terms with your supervisor or your lead. So often it's not easy to say that you don't know to do
yeah.
that, or it's not easy to say that maybe I'm not the right person for that. That's how it was. But here, it's completely different. Right? So I get something, and then I'm like, maybe she's better in doing this job. Maybe she has more knowledge on it, so they can do that better, right? And that freedom is what I see the difference, and that I think it's based on culture, right? And like for example, I think I've always called my supervisor's lead as sir or madam. You can't say their name. It's like maybe in big multinationals in India, it's possible, but like normal companies in India, you can't do that because you need to give that respect. And you mess with the respect, then it could
Mm.
happen something else. Your contract or you get bad terms with that. But you don't see that here in Germany, right? If I call my CEO sir, then he's just gonna look at me weirdly, like what? Um, I call him his name. So those kinds of differences are always there. And when we try to understand these things, it gives us more room to embrace these things and see how we can help them and tell them that, oh, here you don't need those things. We are completely fine, and you don't have to call me sir.
It's educating
But it
along
has
the
to
line.
come from the other
Yeah.
side. Yes. Yes. If my CEO didn't tell me that you don't have to call me, you just call me my name, and I wouldn't have known that.
Yeah.
So it has to come from the other side, and only if they embrace that safe culture, it will come out.
So it's the employees at that point. Obviously you mentioned earlier how everyone driving it, leaders should start the process, but it is really also down to, especially in
Hmm.
remote, not
Hmm.
only remote, but if you're, sitting in a team in Berlin, doesn't matter if you're a multicultural team,
Yeah.
eventually you're going to have kind of
Hmm.
similar ideas. You're going to know roughly how each other works because you're next to each other. But
Yeah.
again, you speak to Joseph, who's in
Hmm.
Berlin once a week, but you're from, say, Tunisia, for example. It's a completely different different understandings. So you two both need to
Mm-hmm.
take the proactive approach to say, look, this is how
Yes.
we communicate in that.
Mm-hmm.
The sir and a
Mm-hmm.
madam thing, that took me a little while to understand as well. And I actually, someone had to tell me because I
Yeah.
always questioned it. It's like, why are you saying dear sir? And this is where the
Mm-hmm.
culture thing, I took that as a sign of rudeness to some degree, sitting there thinking, well, you couldn't even put my name in there, like into a cover letter.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, it's clearly a generic cover letter. But when
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like a couple of
Mm-hmm.
months in, I asked someone, and then they told me, obviously they're from
Mm-hmm.
India, they told me pretty much the same thing and clicked. And then I felt like an absolute
Mm-hmm.
idiot. But, you don't know unless you know, right? So it's those little
Yeah.
subtleties within each culture that we
Yes.
need to be aware of, but
Yes.
it's also impossible to know everything. So it's again linking back to the topic, it's being safe enough in your environment
Mhm.
to voice it and say, look, why are you doing that? Or is there a particular reason? And creating that kind of cycle of education.
Yes. Mhm. Mhm.
Is
True.
there anything specific that you have experienced or implemented with the current team outside of what
Mhm.
we've discussed already that you feel would be a nice, easy way to lead someone into kind of their own journey around psychological safety? Is there anything they can kind of take
Mhm.
away outside what we've already discussed, like I said, that you would like to impart?
Mhm. Yeah. Um, I think when we come into new companies, right, we have something in our minds that, oh, I have to do these things. And I have to clear my probation. I have to do this. I have to make sure that I'm getting my permanent contract, all
Mm,
that stuff. That's something that you think about moving into a new company. Um, on the other side, uh, we also need to see how the company is. Right? There are some things like norms and values within the company that are inbuilt that it's not easy to change and by a new employee just joined 3 months ago. That would be people that are working for more than
mm.
5 6 years. Right? So what I personally looked into it is looking at the values and the thing that each team has and embraced it. And I just added just, just a little bit of icing on top of it, or put a little bit cherry on top of it to get it more um, efficient. And there was a lot of strategic partnerships and a lot of leadership and a lot of collaborations and a lot of partnering kind of thing worked. It's not just done by me, but it's a collaborative effort. If my leads didn't help me, then I wouldn't have done
Mm.
it. So they had to trust me to get that thing. So we embraced each team's culture and we went a little bit in and see what we can do for those teams. Some have um, like stand-ups, some have sprints, some have retrospectives, some just work on a project management tool. So it's not one common thing for everyone, but individualized. It's individualized for
Mm.
teams so that they can work efficiently. The management allows us it, and it's much easier for the teams to do that. So creating that it's just so interesting and so engaging to see how this thing works in its own
We
way.
kind of
Yeah.
embrace the diversity of the organization that you're in.
Hmm.
Don't go in like a ball in a
Hmm.
china shop, trying to change everything all at once.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say in
Yeah,
one
that's,
word.
but I like that. I think it's quite a nice action to
Yeah.
take away. Especially if you're in a larger
Hmm.
organization, as an talent acquisition, you might have 20 plus roles with 20 different stakeholders, um, but
Hmm.
start to get a deeper understanding of what does the team setup
Hmm.
look like, and
Yeah.
then see how can you
Yeah.
slowly add value to
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
safety aspect.
Yeah. One thing I also, one big thing I would say is I completely removed the educational background from the job
Oh,
descriptions.
nice, good.
Um, yes. So that was one big thing that we did, and they agreed on it. But that's something that I wanted it because that stopped with my previous employment. I've seen so many through my career, and I think one that was one of the major disqualifier within job descriptions, that they want someone from a specific
Mm,
university or a specific study program or relevant fields. What does relevant field mean when you say about a specific study program? So we didn't like that, and I proposed that we have to remove that. So every position that goes out will have it without a job, a study program attached to them. So that was another big one that
it
I would
makes it
say.
definitely more inclusive as a talent pool
Hmm.
for sure. I do
Yeah.
agree with that to some degree. I'm going to disagree with as well a little bit because there are some positions that you
Hmm.
would need a degree just because there's certain things that you learn,
Hmm.
especially, and I'm talking more about the technology side,
Hmm.
like a master's or a PhD or obviously a bachelor of science. They're going to
Hmm.
teach you things that generally
Hmm.
most
Hmm.
personal learning or coding schools, and to not discredit coding schools, they've done
Hmm.
brilliant for the industry, but they just don't teach you.
Hmm.
But by and large, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You don't need education for most of
Hmm.
the roles that people are hiring
Yeah.
for these days. It's quite interesting. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
you've seen. Obviously, you're in Germany, and I know you're hiring to Germany as well. Um, but
Hmm.
a big breakthrough for visas and stuff in Germany coming in. So no longer
Yeah.
obviously do we need to
Yes.
have degrees, which obviously coincides what you've just said there. As long as the person, I think it's 3 years
Hmm.
from November
Hmm.
in a relevant
Yes.
field as in doing the same job, and then 2 years I believe it's
Hmm.
dropping to
Hmm.
from March 24, something like that, which is going to be brilliant
Yeah.
for bringing good talent
Yeah.
from overseas into Germany.
Yes. Yeah, it's a massive
Mm,
breakthrough, right? And yeah, that's gonna just increase the amount of applications that's gonna
absolutely.
come in. So.
Nice. Well, look, I
Hmm.
really appreciate you, Joseph, taking the time to run through this. I know, like I said, it's a topic that's close to you, and there's a lot to unpack in this. You know, there's a lot of good elements in there.
Hmm.
A lot of things that I think people probably know to
Hmm.
some degree, but maybe aren't comfortable in voicing or know how to go do it. So hopefully, there's enough for everybody to kind of take away. But like I said, from my biggest learn
Hmm.
clearly is going to be this is a long game. You know, don't expect to change
Hmm.
the psychological
Yes.
safety aspect in a week. You know, it's going to take a while. So
True.
thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me today.
Thank you so much, and it was really nice speaking with you. And thank you.